Welcome to the World Happiness Podcast.
A space to remember that happiness is not just a destination.
It's who we are.
And when we become happiness and cultivate inner peace,
we become living catalysts of transformation.
Lighting the path for others to awaken,
To heal,
To thrive.
Through each conversation, we explore how remembering and embodying our true nature
is an act of collective healing.
and how consciousness and happiness
are the bridge to lasting peace.
Take a breath.
Tune in and join us, not just to listen,
but to expand consciousness and happiness
To every corner of the world. Be very welcome to this first episode of the World Happiness Podcast. We are so excited to start this new journey within a movement that has been going on for many years, but now this is like a new chapter in the movement where we will continue inspiring and igniting a lot of fires towards consciousness, happiness, and freedom. That's the mission in the World Happiness Foundation. I am Paulina Nava, the Director of Global Strategy in the World Happiness Foundation, and now your host in this wonderful new podcast that we will be leading and sharing many insightful conversations with global leaders and experts, change makers. So be very welcome to be in this podcast today. We are very excited again to have you here and to be running this new initiative. Today, as I said, we're continuing a journey. This is not just a podcast series, but a movement that unmasks happiness, that places happiness at the core of all the human beings and of all systems, as well as consciousness, freedom, gratitude, and many other things that we will be talking about in this podcast. Today, as I said, we're continuing a journey. This is not just a podcast series, but a movement that unmasks happiness, that places happiness at the core of all the human beings. And who better to help us unmask happiness and start this journey in this podcast than the visionary leader behind the World Happiness Foundation, also author of Happytalism and many other books that we will delve deeper into this podcast too, and one of the most inspiring voices in well-being and happiness in the world, Luis Miguel Gallardo. Luis, thank you very much for joining us in this new initiative and helping us unmask happiness. Luis, welcome. It's such a joy to have you here in this new space we are creating inside the World Happiness Foundation.
Thank you so much, Paulina, for hosting this podcast that I'm sure will be an incredible success and better will bring hope and will bring freedom, consciousness, and happiness to so many people, which is the overall goal and vision of the World Happiness Foundation. So thank you so much for doing this and congratulations on this first episode.
Thank you very much, Luis. So for starting, I would like to introduce what is the World Happiness Podcast, right? We have a lot of podcasts in the world and we have been doing for so long. You started the foundation more than 10 years ago and we have this journey within the foundation of creating consciousness, happiness, and freedom for all. And I think this is just a new space for keep sharing all that wisdom, all that tools that we know are super important for developing and achieving our goal. So before talking our goal, that I will invite you to do that, I just want to set the space for this podcast, right? This is a space for all the people who wants to really create more consciousness in the world, more happiness and more freedom to immerse in new tools, in new wisdom, that we have tools from all over the world, from many different peoples, a lot of experts and people who really, I think, like follows and adds to our mission. So I think this is a really magical space for us to keep growing and keep expanding consciousness, happiness, and freedom. So now I invite you to tell us a little bit more about what is the World Happiness Foundation. The podcast now is just an extension of what we do in the World Happiness Foundation. So what is the World Happiness Foundation and what's the main mission of the World Happiness Foundation, Luis?
Well, thank you so much. And I agree with you. I feel that this is going to be a space for so many individuals and communities working towards peace, hope, and happiness worldwide to share and to feel safe. I think that this is one of the main reasons why it exists as foundation. We are creating psychological safety, safety nets for so many entrepreneurs, social makers of change, catalysts of well-being that are doing genuine and ingenious work all over the world, from artisans to entrepreneurs, business leaders, government officials, coaches, psychologists, therapists, so many people that are truly walking the talk towards freedom, consciousness, and happiness. And we want to give them voice, as you said. We want to keep this incredible energy of community connection and leveraging everybody's superpowers in order to get to that vision, and that's why we exist. The vision of 10 billion happy by 2050. That's the moonshot. Moonshots are strategies that try to accomplish things that seemed impossible. So what we would love is that whomever lives on planet Earth by 2050 has the right and choose, basically they choose to be happiness. So this is our goal. This is why we exist. And that's why we call ourselves the foundation for world happiness. So we are creating the conditions and helping to create the conditions, especially at the inner level, inner work. We truly focus. If we had to define in a few words what we do inner work, inner education, and transformation towards harmony and balance. Eh, that's what we do. We help, we train, we grow mindsets towards harmony and balance. When you get into that state, we call fundamental peace, we can flourish. We can flourish individually and in community. So the World Happiness Foundation is focused on nurturing that inner peace, that fundamental peace, that harmony, that balance, and freedom, consciousness, and happiness are the three pillars to achieve that state. And the state where all humanity, with all living beings in the planet, will be able to live in harmony and balance themselves.
I love that. And I think that's one of the things that got me involved in the foundation that resonated with me a lot. And I hear you say, become like everyone in the planet in this moonshot of vision that we have in the foundation, that everyone in the planet becomes happiness, like is being of happiness. So you're not saying being happy, right? You're not happy. I am happiness. So I think that's one of the things that calls the attention of many of the people that listens to us in the different programs that we have, and schools of happiness and cities of happiness, and even being happiness is I am happy, but being happiness it's something totally different that even sounds strange, right? And I think that's one of the things that we need to um, change the paradigm in that sense, because we are so used to be happy and follow happiness, and now happiness is becoming kind of a trend. That when I met you, I remember the first podcast we recorded, that it was like happiness is now becoming a trend and something very sellable in the market. So us being the World Happiness Foundation and having this moonshot vision of 10 billion happy people for 2050, how can we start unmasking the concept of happiness? Maybe it's not even a concept, right? And how can we pass from being happy to being happiness and really embodying happiness? What's the difference in this world of all that merchandisable happiness to the one we are promoting and really trying people to enhance that happiness?
Well, that's a beautiful question. When you want to become the foundation for world happiness, we have to understand very well what we are talking about and especially what we feel. I think that we are still conditioned, and we are conditioned at so many levels that it's very difficult to be neutral, to actually live from the core of light that we are. Because we have so many layers. It's like an onion. We have layers and layers that have been built over time since we are born with our parents, with our families, with our neighbors, with our countries, with the way we are pushed to think in a specific way. I think that we have to go back into feelings by starting unmasking feelings. So actually naming feelings. And it's very difficult for people to go beyond 3 4 emotions. So we have to go beyond that element of feelings and what is it to feel, because we are emotional beings. This is one of the first conditionings that we have to talk about when we unmask happiness. We are not rational, only rational beings. We are actually emotional beings. And we rationalize our emotion in order to understand them. But the first thing that we have is an emotion. And those emotions are based on beliefs. This is why changing behaviors is so difficult, because uh, the beliefs that we have are created in a very early stage of life. And normally that's conditioned by our parents. So if we start believing that we are not enough, we are going to live our life with that belief. And that I'm not enough, and it's going to create a whole mindset of scarcity, a whole a mindset of I have to do a lot because I'm not enough. So imagine just that one single belief, if we are born with that belief. So unmasking happiness is truly going from emotions to beliefs and unmasking that belief. What is the root of the belief? So unmasking happiness is completely correlated to unmasking beliefs. The way we go deeper into beliefs, that's the way we are going to be showing up, and that's going to be the way we are showing off in the world. And this is a lot of what's going on today with happiness. People still think that and associate happiness with external achievement, with success, with money, with fame, with approval. But true happiness begins when we remove those marks we wear. The I am fine, the I must be strong, the I am to earn love, and we become our true selves. I say is free to be, freedom from fear. So that way I feel seen, I feel understood, I feel connected. So we truly have to go through a whole reframing of conditioning. And we have to move from a scarcity mindset to abundance mindset. We have to move from fear to love. We call this the alchemy of leadership. How do we transform plum into gold when it's not easy? How do I transform despair into hope? So this is the whole journey of unmasking what's going on, of unmasking happiness. It's a journey where instead of looking outside and to external achievements to realize what's true happiness, we go inside. And that's the way you unmask really almost everything when you embody. That's why we say be in happiness. It's not about just being happy. It's not the noun, it's the verb, it's the walking the talk, it's the embodiment from every cell of our body. We are expanding and we are fluid and flowing into what we want to see outside us. But if we want to see happiness outside, we have to go inside first. That's the big challenge. How do we get into the inside? How do we become free to be? Freedom from fear, consciousness to expand and evolve, and happiness to share. So that will be my first recommendation to everybody. You really want to live a life of harmony and balance, with bliss, with joy, with happiness, you have to unmask your beliefs. You have to understand the roots of those beliefs, and you have to heal them if they are not serving you in the way you want to live your life. So that would be the first step for unmasking happiness.
I love that. And because right now we're talking about happiness as a mask, right? And I think you touch a lot of wonderful points on how happiness now, besides just a feeling, right, that many people pursue, that I think that's also something that we need to change. Happiness has become also this mask, right? And we see this mask of happiness as how we actually take happiness from the outside, and this power and this fame and all this external validation. We now, it has become like this false happiness, and I've been talking about that a lot in the last days. How this concept of happiness, many people repels it because we have all those topics of toxic happiness, and we were just talking about that, right? How if we put toxic besides happiness, it just becomes something bad. But I think here is how this happiness has become false. And false, we talk about a mask, right? When we try to achieve so many things and we pursue and look for happiness outside, in the sense of when I have that, I will be happy, right? When I achieve that, I will be happy. So we kind of put the I think those are the masks, right? Oh, I have this, so I'm happy. So this is my mask of happiness. And I think also happiness becomes a mask when we invalidate all the other feelings. And as you said, we are emotional beings. And then happiness becomes a mask because in this movement and this capitalization of happiness, we've become to think that we need to be happy all the time. And I think that's one of the main problems, because that leaves all the different emotions beside, right? So if we're not happy, is we are not good. We are not being good at being happy. But I think it really embodies being happiness. It embodies being also sad, right? And it embodies all the different emotions, because when we get comprehensive on all what brings to us all those different emotions, then we can truly cultivate this inner happiness. So, what do you think about this, and how can we start, or what would be the next step? Because you already gave the first one, the next step to keep unmasking and accepting these other feelings, so we can really break the mirror and the mask of happiness that the outside world has put to us.
Okay, well, this is a fascinating topic, and that's why we keep talking after many years about what is it that you call happiness. Because this is the beginning. The way you define things, they really create a common understanding. So I think that we can define happiness any way we want. Anybody can do it. But when we get into positive psychology, when we get into the science of happiness, there is terminology that is accepted in order to get a common ground. So, for example, one short definition that I like and that we use is subjective well being. So, it's the way you perceive being well. So, there's nothing wrong about this. So, that's not toxic happening. If you put toxic before peace, peace becomes toxic. If you put toxic before ice cream becomes toxic. So anything that you associate with toxic is toxic. So this is very interesting because I wrote a whole uh, paper around this term. There are many people that resist to happiness, the same way that people resist to peace. Uh, Today in the world, we have so much violence going on, and people still think that violence is a means to peace. Well, it's not. Violence is bringing more violence. And this is part of the conditioning. The conditioning that we have as humanity is revenge. We are trained to revenge. We are trained to, you do something to me, I do something to you. It's action reaction, and I try to do even more harm to you, as the way society acknowledge that if you don't do that, you are even treated as a weak person. So revenge is one of the conditionings that we have to change. How do we change revenge? By forgiving. So the antidote to revenge is forgiving. So this is very important to understand in order to understand why happiness is so critical. When you forgive, you are basically acknowledging and separating the person from their behaviors. And you are doing a service to yourself, because the poison is in you. It's not in the other person, it's in you. So by forgiving, you release poison. You release what is harming you, and it can harm you for the whole life, and even many lives if you believe in future lives. So the antidote to revenge is forgiveness. The beginning of healing in the world starts with forgiveness. Once you forgive, you can get into a state of harmony and peace, and you can start basically becoming of service to others, because that's basically why we are here on earth, to be of service and to enjoy life. So this is very important, because depending on what you believe you are on earth for, then joy and happiness become the key element to achieve it. And this is what we believe at the World Happiness Foundation. We exist as humanity to enjoy life. To live a life is a gift that we get every day. And if we get a gift, we have to enjoy it. If we don't enjoy life, it's because our beliefs are limiting us. That's why we teach and we train how to forgive. The moment you forgive and you have compassion and you have acceptance, you can move into the enjoyment part. So why happiness is important? Because that's what you use to enjoy life. So when you are happiness, you are enjoying life, and you are enjoying life with others, because that's the way humanity is about. We are relational animals, and we can only survive in relationships. Since we are kids, we rely on our parents. We cannot live, we cannot survive without relationships. So humanity cannot live, cannot survive without relationships. Relationships have to be based on the fundamental element of forgiveness. Once you achieve that level, you move into harmony and balance that brings you into the purpose of life, which is enjoying life, is enjoying it, living it to the fullest. So that's why you need happiness. Because if you are not happiness, you are not enjoying life. Because you are not expanding the energy that is needed to keep moving the wheel into a wheel of collective well-being, of collective happiness, what we call being well at the supramental level. So I think this is part of our argumentation about happiness. Happiness cannot be toxic anytime, unless it's fake, unless you are making it in order to show off something that is not true. But that's why it's masking it. So you are creating a mask of fake news about who you truly are. And if you are sad in this moment, that's what you have to show up. That's the issue, is that society doesn't allow us to be vulnerable, because it's requiring us to be strong all the time. We cannot be weak, because that's how we get punished. by others, how we get bullied by others. So this is the training and the learning that we have to do. The more congruent you are, the more you go at the top, the more vulnerable you are, the more you forgive, the more you are compassionate, the more you live a life of purpose. You align your purpose with what you do, your vocation. The more you are in balance and harmony, the more finally you can use your happiness in order to help others to achieve their own happiness. So this is a whole rationale that we can explain further, but I feel that there is always a beginning, and we have to start by something. And this is something that we tested in so many conflicts around the world, in so many traumas around the world, is by accepting who we are and by forgiving. Accept and forgive, and life completely changes. And that's the beginning to unmask your happiness, because you start changing your beliefs.
Wow, I think now we have so many keys that are really important. Like I will take and kind of develop on these topics because I think you mentioned so many important things in why happiness matters for even for this fundamental piece that you were talking in the beginning, right? So one of the points that you mentioned just now is how happiness becomes a mask, right? When we there's no toxic happiness, and I love that because there's no toxic love. Because when you put toxic behind, besides love and besides happiness, it's not happiness and love anymore. So how does happiness becomes this mask is when we fake happiness, right? And I think that's one of the most important things, because in order for you to embrace happiness and to be happiness, you need to be authentic. And being authentic means also being vulnerable, being sad sometimes, being angry sometimes. So I think what when we embody and when we are happiness, as you were saying, is when we integrate that we can be happy and angry at the same time. We can be, or we can have space for anger in happiness. We can have space for sadness in happiness and in love too. Right? So I think that's one of the key points that we try to bring into the table, because right now happiness it's become this trend and these things that many people pursue, as I was saying. But here is one of the key points, right? Embracing with vulnerability and with authenticity our being, and showing up as we really are. So when happiness becomes a mask, then's when it becomes something else that's not happiness, that it's toxic. And that's the what we need to realize. And that's why I also think consciousness it's super important in this process. Right? That's why it's not happiness alone. We need consciousness, and we put consciousness, happiness, and freedom in our mission and in everything that we're doing in the foundation, right? So I think that's super important. And that's why in all our programs, also in the World Happiness Academy, that's part of the foundation, we work with this, because you also mentioned forgiveness as a pathway to happiness and to being and embracing this happiness. Because if we don't forgive, we have this poison, as you were saying. And I think that's also very important. And that's why we start by working it inside us, right? In a personal level. And I also think it's important to create this happiness and enhance this happiness in systems and in communities. So how, Luis, how do we go from personal happiness, and every time that we start working and unmasking happiness and unmasking ourselves to be more authentic and more vulnerable, and we work with this forgiveness and all with all these different emotion, that I will just make another parenthesis here, is how important it is in order to create that happiness inside, to also go to the depths of the darkness, right? To be the light we are, or to enhance the light we are, we also need to embrace the shadows and go into the shadows, so we can also create more happiness, right? So that's part of the personal part of happiness. How do we now, or how do we begin with this collective happiness?
Well, I feel I love when you talk about shadows, because this is one of the elements that we truly admire and focus on as part of the training that we do at the World Happiness Foundation. We even have a whole system called MetaPet system that explains at the school level, at the coaching level, at the therapeutic level, how can we transform low vibration, those moments and those behaviors based on beliefs that are harming us, and we call them shadows. This is very much based on Carl Jung's theories, and we've been exploring so many ancestral wisdom from all over the world, from the Amazonia to India to um, philosophies such as Buddhism or Sufism, you name it. We truly map out everything around the world that can help us achieve this goal of fundamental peace and world happiness for all by 2050. So, embracing the shadow is something critical in order to find the gift of light within the shadow. That's the first step. And we can do this individually and we can do this collectively because they are collective shadows. And actually, this is how we connect the individual with the collective. So we all live in communities, we all belong to families. And at some point, if one's family suffer, let's say that one of the members of the family commits suicide, the whole family is going to be affected by that decision. And not just the family, but the community around the family. If you don't accept and if you don't heal the loss, the whole community is going to be affected by the way they deal with that trauma. So this is where we incorporate another element. What do we do when we get traumatized? How do we deal with trauma? Because depending on how do I deal with it, I'm gonna be living a stress post-trauma or growth post-trauma. And we know that a almost double of people who go through post-traumatic stress go through post-traumatic growth. So this is why it's so important to acknowledge sadness, to acknowledge anger, to acknowledge guilt, to acknowledge shame, because these are all separation, because these all are, in Indian culture, you call this sanskars. These are impressions that we have in our memory. And the memory is not just in our brain. Our memory is in the body, is in the energy body, is in the physical body, is in different bodies. So those sanskars or impressions or wounds stay in us and with us until we heal them, until we transform them as alchemists into what they truly are, light. So when we know that we are light, that we are energy, that's the way you connect with the communities. So at the individual level, we talk about contemplation. We talk about meditation, mindfulness, being free from fear, exploring the shadows, transforming the shadows into light. When we move this to the collective, that's what we call interdependence. So we say that we are interdependent with all living beings. We, the more independent we are, the more healthy our relation is going to be. There's not going to be codependence. It's going to be interdependence. In order to get interdependence, every species, every single living being has to be independent. So the human being cannot be the predator of all living beings on the planet. We have to understand that we are one more of the living beings, of the species, and we have to coexist and we have to respect everybody's life. So when you understand the interdependence of nature, the interdependence and the overlapping of all these systems, which is in self or individual with community and the planet, and then within the whole cosmos and the universe where we are living in, then you start dissociating and seeing things from a much uh, strategic strategic way, from a more systemic way. You see the interconnections of the system and the interdependence. Um, so this factor becomes so critical that is giving us the first um, element to create governance around the world. And that governance has to be based on independence and independence of units. We call these communities. So small communities have to be completely independent to be interdependent. And this is something that, as part of what we call Happytalism, which is a new paradigm for human progress, is what is going to bring us into a global democratic citizenship. So we have to think in a planetary way. We have to see the planet and we have to understand that we are living beings on the planet. That's the way we can then create the rules and create the systems and create the rituals and create the laws and create the processes to live in peace. Because this is another key realization. We cannot justify violence. It's like when you play sports, and I know that you know, and you've been a goalkeeper, and I've been a goalkeeper. You in soccer, I've been in handball, but we know what it is to play a sport. You cannot harm the other. You cannot insult. You cannot even uh, do anything that looks like harming the other psychologically or physically, because you get a red card. You are out of the game. So something that we've been able as humanity to create rules in sports that actually create sports a game, because sports are games. So we are respecting, unless you get into the lead, and that's a business. But before you get into that high performing elite level, everything is a game. So when you're in a game, it's not good to harm the other. So if we accept that, why don't we accept this in international politics and international relations? How is it allowed to harm others and kill other people? This is out of our mind. So we don't have the right leadership that is able to make decisions for the goodwill of all, because of the belief system that is conditioning our need for survival. So this is what we need to train in a different way. We need to use a new narrative. But this is very much linked to the question of collected. We are relational beings. We cannot survive without the others. That's why communities, that's why families are the source of life on this planet. So we know that we have to combine unmasking happiness for self, which is going to the source. And as you know, I use a lot of hypnotherapy, to go deep, deep, deep into the core state. And I do thousands and thousands of these hypnotherapies. I haven't found one single person, not even one, that is not good in nature. 100% of us are good in nature. When we get to core state, when we get to the source of who we are, we get into a state of bliss, ananda. We get into a state of peace. We get into a state of happiness. We get into a state of enjoyment. I've seen people crying, not of sadness, but of bliss. They were ecstatic. They got into complete ecstasies because they were at peace. That's the concept of humanity. If that's the case, why aren't we like that? Why aren't we like that in community? So this is the answer that we have to basically uh, give, and this is the roadmap that we are building as a foundation. This is our theory of change because we believe that we are good in nature, that we are good at core state. That's the state we should be in. If we are not in that state, something is wrong. And we want to understand what's wrong in order to help those who are awakening, who are being uh, opening their eyes to the reality of we are good by nature, into getting them enjoy that state. So we have to remember who we are. We have to link back to the source of who we are, and we are that in community. So we cannot be happy if we are not happy in community. That's why happiness become a responsibility. Responsibility means the ability to respond. And we all have the ability to respond to being happiness in the world. That's why we elevated this as a human right at the United Nations. That's why International Day of Happiness was created 12, almost 13 years ago. That's why we keep connecting institutions with communities and with individuals to remind people that happiness is not a commodity, that happiness is not a mask. Happiness is at the core of who we are as humanity, and we have to do this in community.
I love that. It's beautiful because I think that's part of the unmasking, right? And removing layers to get to our core. And I think that's something that changes the whole paradigm and redefines, because if we are not looking outside for, as we were saying at the beginning, the for happiness, then we just need to take the masks or the layers to get into that core, that we already are, that light, that love, that happiness. So I think it's really important as just to know that we don't need to reach anything in the outside. It's just about removing the layers. And those layers are sometimes those emotions and those problems and those everything that we acknowledge, and then we take it off. But if we are not aware of them and we don't see them, we cannot take them off, right? So that will be the first point that I rescue from all that you've been saying. And also something very important that you said is responsibility, right? How, of course, we are responsible of our own happiness, but I think if we just think individually, it's a lot of pressure to know that happiness and love and change, it's just in ourselves, right? So that's why we believe in the foundation too, and I've learned from you and from all that I've learned in the foundation, that by individuals alone, as we are interdependent beings, is how do we are all responsible, right? Me as an individual, I'm responsible of my own happiness. That's why we teach how to be happy and how to embrace forgiveness and empathy and all the different things to enhance our own happiness and get to the core. And then also, I think that's very, very important, because that's when, and I talk about this, and maybe we can talk about this in a different episode, but how happiness also becomes a dictatorship, right? Because we put all the responsibility in the person and not in the systems, and not in the companies, not in the schools, not in the cities, not in the governance or the leaders. So what you've just said, I think it's very important, because we as individuals have our own responsibility, but also as systems that we are creating, we need to create the conditions for people to be that happiness, right? We need to become places of happiness, and that's why our programs also for enterprises and schools and cities are that important. We just don't train people and leaders, we also create the system so people can flourish and people can thrive, and I think that's really important too. But I think, Grace, we could, like, we have many, many topics to talk about, and this could last 3 hours. I think for this first episode is a great start for start lightening up fires, right? And these flames of consciousness, of happiness. So what would you say to as a final reflection on this unmasking happiness and all of the work that we do in the foundation?
Well, I think that you put it very eloquently and very, very right. We cannot get to 10 billion happy by 2050 if we are not happy in community. So this is the beginning. The beginning is being of service to others and give. So I would do this as a strategy. Forgive and give. Forgive and give. So you forgive, you clear the samskars, the impressions that create toxic inside, not outside, toxic inside. And then you clear it. You embrace, transform the shadow. And once you do this, you give. You give from love. Actually, giving from fear is not helping. When we give from fear, normally you feel guilt and you feel worse. And when you receive from somebody who is giving from fear, you feel it and you don't like it. So if we want to give, which is the solution, gratitude, we have to forgive first. So forgiveness, compassion, gratitude. Those are the three steps. You forgive yourself and others. You become compassionate, which is love in pain. So you feel the pain of the other and you give love. And when you do that, you become gratitude. So you are the gratitude that you want to see in the world. If we were able to do that, that would be a different world, completely different world. And that will be 10 billion happy by 2050. So that will be my ask for everybody who is listening. If you want to commit to happiness, start by forgiving. Continue with compassion and end with gratitude. That's it. That's when you achieve a state of happiness. It's not by forcing and masking yourself with external recognition, with fame, with power or money. That's the essence of capitalism. We have to go beyond. We have to. This is not conscious capitalism. It's a new paradigm that we need. We need happytalism. We need a new system where freedom, consciousness, happiness are the goals. And by being the goals, we know that the road is very clear. The road is through forgiveness, through compassion, and through gratitude. If we were able to do that, that's it. We don't need anything else. So we'll keep insisting and helping people to get into the journey of forgiveness, compassion, and gratitude as much as they can.
I love that. What a wonderful closure. And I think one of those, all of those elements gives a topic for another episode, right? One on gratitude, one on forgiveness, one on happytalism too, that many people may know, many people may not know what that is, and also on compassion. And many things that we just mentioned today gives a door, an open door for a new episode. And that's why I'm so excited about this podcast because it's just starting. So I think we have a beautiful project in hands with all these beautiful topics. And thank you for being our guest today and leading the way on this movement of consciousness, happiness, and freedom with forgiveness, with gratitude, with compassion. So I think this was a very beautiful opening, opening the hearts, opening the minds for what's to continue in this wonderful movement that we are leading in the World Happiness Foundation. So thank you, Luis, for being here and sharing with us all these beautiful insights.
Thank you so much, Paulina, for leading this podcast and for bringing so much hope and so much light all over the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much and see you all in our next episode.